Good afternoon, almost. Good afternoon, -1. Welcome again to the Dean's Innovative Leaders Series, and a very special presentation today from Ursula Burns, CEO and Chairman of Xerox. We're just delighted to have Ursula with us, and I'm just delighted to see this extremely full house to listen to Ursula. Ursula is a good friend and a great supporter of MIT, as many of you know. I hope all of you know. She is a member of the MIT Corporation. Her son is a member of the MIT community as a student. And Ursula has been named the commencement speaker for MIT for this spring during MIT's 150th celebration of its founding. It is really an extraordinary opportunity, perhaps for us, to hear a preview, and for those of you who are second years, literally a preview of what some of the thoughts are that you may hear a little bit later this spring. Ursula is not only a friend of MIT and its Sloan School on a personal level, but there have been great organizational relationships between Xerox and MIT and its Sloan School. When Professor Deborah Ancona, the head of MIT's Leadership Center, was just beginning to pursue this expanded set of research on leadership from the middle, distributed leadership in organizations, Xerox was the very first field site to pursue some of the earlier experiments and hypotheses with respect to distributed leadership. And the relationship has strengthened and expanded in many ways from that time. Ursula began at Xerox in 1980 as a mechanical engineering intern, was named CEO in 2009 and chairman of the board in 2010. Again, as many of you know, Ursula was the first African-American woman to be named CEO of an American firm of this size, and the first woman to succeed another woman as CEO of a firm of this size. And in that circumstance, this organizational leader was quoted as having said, "The accolades are good for 5 minutes, but then it takes kind of a shine off the real story. The real story is not Ursula Burns. I just happen to be the person standing up at this point representing Xerox." You know, it says a lot about the leadership style of this individual. But Ursula, if you don't mind too much, we really would like to put the spotlight on you for a little while and hear your thoughts and how you've led this team through some extraordinary times. Please welcome Ursula Burns.
Thank you.
That's my choice.
So thank you, Dean Schmidtlein. Before I go too far, I want my Xerox family up front to stand up. Wave your hands. So if you're looking for anything that has to do with anything, business, process management, document management, these 8 people are the guys who you should be speaking to. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And then the last thing I'm going to embarrass totally, my son. He better stay. Where is he? So I don't think we have a lot of mothers in this room, but you will be mothers at one point. The women, at least, will be mothers at one point. And you will know exactly how I feel when I ask my son to stand up in a room like this. It's the most amazing, just phenomenal feeling. So I'm happy you're here. And then now you can leave because you're going to embarrass me or get me nervous. It's really a pleasure to be here, and it's a great opportunity, I think, for me to continue to say thank you and to praise this great organization, this great university. As the dean said, I am involved very heavily. I sit on the corporation board. I head the library's visiting committee. We try to funnel as much money as we can here. I do personally by paying an exorbitant amount of money to send a kid here. So I'm kind of invested. I do love this place. And one of the reasons why I do is because it's so good. It's a phenomenal institution that does great work. And I'll get to this when I speak throughout the speech, and hopefully when we have questions and answers. It's really important to understand just how good the place is, so that as you go forward, you can actually use the position that you're in, the exalted position that you're in. When you say, I graduated from MIT, people will actually pause and listen, and you should use those little moments that you have people listening to you to do and say good things, to move the world forward. I've been asked to do 3 things, and I'll do them for about 15 minutes, and then questions and answers, and the normal rule is they have to be questions and answers, or else I'll be really embarrassed here, standing in front of my son with no questions. What you wanted me to do is talk about my journey to the top, and I'll do that. To talk a little bit about leadership, and I'll spend probably the shortest amount of time on that, and then spend some time on just a dialogue and a discussion about what you've heard. So let me jump right into it. I am an American story, a story that can only happen in the United States of America, they say. This is the typical, I was born poor, I walked to school with no shoes. Those stories that your mother would tell you a long time ago. Well, we clearly almost had that. I was born in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, in the housing projects in New York City. I have a brother older and a sister younger, both phenomenal people. My mother raised the 3 of us by herself. My father was not at all in the picture. We were raised in the 60s. So I was born in 58, we were raised in the 60s. And the 60s were a very tumultuous time, as you know. When I was 5 years old, John Kennedy was killed before I was a teenager, Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy were killed. It was a time of just amazing disruption and uncertainty in the United States. And this was well before they had programs like they do today to support families. Even though those programs are not great, they are better than they were when my mother was raising my brother and sister and I. Despite all of that, it's interesting during this time how opportunistic, how full of hope the nation was. I could feel that when I was growing up, that people were civil rights was blossoming and it was becoming significantly more in vogue. Things like affirmative action, which is now called balanced workforce, diversity, whatever it is, it was all disruptive but opportunistic for people in the world, for young people in particular. And it's interesting if you contrast that to today, right? Today we have all kinds of stuff. We have the greatest wealth in the world being distributed around the world better than before. And we have relative peace, at least in this country and in most of the developed nations. And today I think the feeling is a little bit more pessimistic than it was when I was growing up, and there was significantly less opportunity then. And that's something that we should actually think about and talk about, how we changed that. We were poor, for sure, but my brother and my sister and I were shielded totally from this poverty. And we were shielded by this one person, and it was my mother. So if I were to put myself in my mother's shoes during that time, I say I had a great childhood, we had a great time, great education, we never really wanted for a whole lot. And contrast that if my mother were standing up here speaking, she was nervous every day. She was frantic every day to try to make sure that we were safe and fed and educated. Those are the 3 things: safe, fed, and educated. And having educated not only in school, but socially to be what she called good people, to be what she called contributors, and her definition of success. And I'll get into that in a little while. And this is another thing I want us to contrast about today and how some of that focus has moved almost solely to measures that are measured by a number of group of people that you run, that you lead, and how much money you make. And it's very different than when I was growing up. It was all about doing better, doing good, not only for you, but for the people who you impact around you, and as far out as you can reach, doing better, doing good for these people. My mother gave me 3 things. One was courage. And her statement to me was always that you control significantly more about your life and your future than anyone else. So if there's 100, a scale of 100, you have 98 notches of how you're going to look in the future, and the rest of the people have 2. And so just focus on the 98, and you'll swamp the 2. The 2 that are positive, great. The 2 that are negative, you'll swamp those as well. So just focus on what you can do to make your life better. She gave me will, this whole idea about there is nothing that can hold you back. The only thing that can hold you back is you. And then love. And her love was unconditional, very, very clear. My mother was black and white. There was wrong and there was right. Period. It was not well, this could be right under these circumstances. It was wrong and right. So stealing is always wrong. Okay? And so you say, well, today, stealing is okay if. None of that stuff, So it was actually, obviously the world is not that clear today, right? Or it probably even wasn't then. But she didn't think that it was useful to confuse us at the ages that we were at, so it was just either wrong or right. She couldn't control really well the circumstances that we lived in. We lived in pretty bad circumstances. Our house was always clean. We always had meals on the table. And she would always say that she couldn't fix the outside world, but she could fix what she called our character. And she would say to me all the time, and to my brother and sister as well, that where you are is not who you are. And she said to me before my mother died 33 years ago, when I was 25, she was 49. She said to me, remember this today, when you have the only thing you have is opportunity in front of you to get better. Also remember it when you are better. When you are sitting there in power, where you are is not who you are. And I forgot it for 20 years until I became president of Xerox, and I started to then realize that if you don't check yourself early, you'll start to become these ugly people, and these ugly leaders who think that they have so much and that they are so far away from the people who actually make the world go, from the people who work in the company, your team members with you. So it was really interesting and amazingly insightful for her to tell me this and to actually say it in the tone that she did, not only today, but when you are successful. Like many other people at the time, my mother had one quick solution to all of our problems, and that was education, period. So my mother made $4,400 a year. Her maximum salary was $4,400 a year, which is amazing. We got dental care by her cleaning a dentist's office. We got health care by her cleaning a doctor's office. That's how it was done at the time, or at least how she did it at the time. And all of her money was put into sending my brother, my sister, and I to Catholic schools, quote unquote, the equivalent of a private school. And everything. So $4,400 a year. It cost $65 a month for me to go to school and my brother and my sister. So when you do the math, you say, this woman was amazing, right? If she could manage my money today, we'd be billionaires. I mean, I would have saved a tremendous amount of money more than I did. I went to Catholic school from first grade all the way up through high school. I went to an all-girl Catholic high school. And it was a great school. Taught you how to read and write and to do basic arithmetic. Read and write very, very well and to do basic arithmetic. And at that time, there were three options given to us when we were graduating. One was to be a nun, which I opted out of really early in the, in the voting process. I had failed all choices for nun. The second was to be a nurse, and the third was to be a teacher. And by the way, that wasn't because, those were the dictated options at the time. That wasn't because they didn't think we could do more. It was just the way the world was at that time. So I definitely didn't like nun, as I said, and nurse was definitely not for me. I actually had serious thoughts about becoming a teacher. But then I started to look at the salary of teachers and realized that one of the things that my mother did deserve was a little bit better living standard. So I had to figure out a way to get to college, which was not an option for us. That was not an option. It was a given that we would go to college. And I had to find something to study in college that made the most money after 4 years. That was it, because we had to go to college for 4 years, and the most money. And this was before Google and all of the, Facebook, all of this stuff today. They had this book called the Barron's book. They probably still have that book, right? But it's now on the internet, right? You had to go to the library. You couldn't check it out. And we couldn't buy it. It was like $50. That was more money than you could possibly imagine on a book. So you had to go to the library and leaf through this book and find out what careers they were and what schools they were. And there was no pictures of the schools. That's a little black and white thing of the library, of every school's library. And what I found in that book was amazing. One was that if you studied chemical engineering for 4 years, you'd make more money than any other field at the time. It was the highest paying field. I said, this is actually, I'm going to become a chemical engineer then. It was very, very simple. I'm serious. That was the thought process was. I was pretty good at math, pretty good at science, but we had a very rudimentary education in those areas, nothing like today. Very good basic education, but nothing advanced. So I said, chemical engineering sounds okay. I had taken a chemistry class in college. I had taken math classes. I could do this. I applied to all kinds of schools all over the nation and got into a school called Brooklyn Poly, and to study chemical engineering, which was fascinating to me since, like I said, I'd only taken one chemistry class. And I go to Brooklyn Poly. I take the first chemistry class, and I realize there's a huge problem here. I am not good at chemistry, and I hated it. I liked the engineering part, but the chemistry part was just not good. And I was thinking at the time that maybe I should actually just change totally and maybe become a nurse or a teacher. And I had a great advisor, and instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, she said, just change the engineering field. You like the basic stuff of it, why don't you? So I switched to mechanical engineering, and the rest, as I say, is history. The good news about mechanical engineering, and it's almost by accident, is that I was hired by this company called Xerox Corporation when I was a junior to go work in upstate New York. Side story, I thought it was upstate. I'm born in Lower East Side of Manhattan. Upstate New York to me is Bear Mountain. It's as far up as we ever went, ever. And so when I went for the first time to Rochester, it took 5.5 hours. I kept saying, what the hell is going on? When are we going to get there? Geography was not a strong suit for me either. Chemistry and geography, I failed both. This led to a summer job at Xerox, and the rest, as they say, is history. By entering Xerox as an engineer, I was able to learn the company from the smallest embodiment of the company all the way up through. I had to learn about customers. I had to learn about project management and working with people, inside and outside. I had to learn dealing with making presentations selling ideas and concepts and making presentations in large groups. It was a great way to enter the company. When I joined in 1980, there were literally, virtually no women in engineering. This is in 1980. And there were no black women in the company at that time. Engineers, there were a lot of black women in finance and HR, et cetera, but no black women engineers. And it's interesting how that uniqueness was more of an advantage than a disadvantage for me. Actually, it was a significant advantage for me. It got me seen. So if you sit in a room like this and everybody looks like the dean, and and then there's one of me, everybody kind of, good, bad, or indifferent, starts to look at me. And if you can use that to your advantage, you should, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well. It's interesting, I joined Xerox with the intention of staying for a couple of years and then moving back downstate. That's the way everybody enters, I think, at that time, everybody entered companies. I'll just try it out for a while and figure out if I like it, and then I'll hop to another place. Obviously, 35 years later, 30 years later, I'm still in the same place. Never did Xerox say to me, it's important that you look or act or become like X. Never did they say it's really important that you fit in. It's, you got to really fit in. What they said to me was two things. One is that you really have to work hard. And we hired you because we think you're smart. I did great after figuring out that I wasn't going to be a chemical engineer and actually getting up to speed with the basics. I was a great student. So we need your mind, is what we want. We want you to work hard, and we're going to give you lots of opportunity. And if you can match these two things together, opportunity and hard work, they said to me, that's what they call affirmative action. So affirmative action is we're going to lay out a whole bunch of options for you, and we're going to drag you all over the world, which they essentially did, and give you projects, big, small, lateral, up, down, and you just have to put all your mind and energy into it, and if you do well there, you'll do well in this company. And so one of the reasons why I stayed through all of this time was that they never went back on that promise to me, that commitment that said that they'll continue pushing me just as long as I continue to put my energy and my heart into it. So opportunity and hard work. Going all over, doing whatever, not always looking for the next job, actually spending a whole lot of time on this job, and then literally taking it seriously every single day and making sure that you learn every single day and become really, really good at what you do. I think that, I'm speaking a little bit to the converted here at this school. I mean, you didn't walk in here and just kind of stumble into MIT. You had to work hard to get here. But it never changes. It never changes. This is the kind of thing that you have to do every single day, because it's not because there's somebody else out there trying to get your work. It's because the people who are paying you deserve it. They deserve the energy and the focus, because they are entrusting their dollars in your shares, or the other employees are entrusting their futures in you, et cetera. There's a reason to work hard here. So I have a couple of things on career management, and then I'll go into leadership. So there's 6 things on career management. First, you have to do the job that you're in well. So people would come to me all the time and they say, executive interviews, we call them. Come and sit down, they all look like you, but they have suits on. And they sit down and they say, I really want to be a vice president. I say, okay, good. Of what? I don't care. Anything is fine. And I said, interesting concept. So the position is more important. The title and the position is significantly more important than the content of the work that you're doing. Not a good signal. So first, you're going to start off being a cleaner, or a mechanical engineering lab person, or electrical engineering, whatever, computer scientist, whatever it is. You have to really get to be really good at that before you move to the next thing. Second, when you can't move to the next thing right after you learn the first thing. This is another thing that's really amazing. So they say, I've done this job for 3 years and I now know it all, so I would like to go to the next job. And I say, so here is even point. When you take a job, you're operating below the level. So we're teaching you where the bathrooms are, how to turn on the computer, how to work nice with others, all of the stuff that you have to do. We're teaching you a whole bunch, and so there's a whole bunch of area underneath the curve. And then you know all that stuff, and you start to do the work, do the job, and you say, I'm now bored, I'm done. But if you leave at that point, you still haven't given back all that area under the curve. Imagine if we do this forever, right? We'll have a whole bunch of companies, individuals and companies who teach the employees, and then they just go off and do the next thing. And it's not like school anymore when you go out there to work. It's not like school. Getting the A is not the end of the story. It's getting the A and then building a whole new course, figuring out a way to teach the course differently, figuring out a way to actually impart more information, so to figure out a way to transform the job that you did. After you do that, then you can move. Right? So it's do the job that you're in, do it really, really well, and then sit still for a while, and then try to figure out a way to transform that role. And if you do it that way, you'll actually stand out more than the person who actually flips from job to job to job to job, like is so common today. The third is to learn to love change. This is something I think that America is getting bad at. We were very, very good at it, but now we're getting bad at it. And that is, whatever you think, whenever you think things are okay and you can rest for a minute, you're in trouble. Because someone out there is doing something that's going to disrupt your life, not on purpose. They don't even know who you are, not on purpose. And if you sit still, they'll overrun you. And you won't have enough time to react, to shift, to change. And this should be a positive thing, not a negative thing. The whole game is to try to figure out a way to figure the next thing out before the next guy does. It's not a war. It is literally like a little computer game. Let's try to manage change in a very positive way for whoever you're working for, or whoever you're engaged in, whatever organization you're engaged in. The fourth is really think hard about turning down a job. If someone, especially a person senior to you, offers you a role, you should almost surely take it. If they had the concern about you as an individual and the thought long enough to say, this is what we need you to do, take it. And then ask how much money, and then ask all the other questions that come forward. Because one of the things I found out in my life, and all the jobs that I've had that led me to this point, none of them did I have in my career plan. I had a whole career plan 50 times, right? I kept writing it out, and every single job that I got, just about every single job that I got, including this last one, somebody called me and said, here it is, we need you to do this, we need you to do this, we need you to do this. And short of my family, things that require you to disrupt your family, I took every single one of them. Even some of the things that required that we would disrupt the family. We lived in England for a couple of years, had to uproot the kids and uproot the husband, et cetera, et cetera. So actually, people who are concerned about you generally don't have bad intent. They are thinking about you from the perspective of how you can help the organization, and that's the whole goal, whatever organization you're in, how to help the organization. The fifth thing, another thing I think we're losing, is have fun. So there was this thought that work was drudgery, that you had to go there. God, and I can't wait till Friday, and it's just, goodness gracious, this is a horrible thing. If that's the way you feel, find another job, because you're not working in the right place. No matter what people say, you spend a tremendous amount of your physical time and even more of your mental time at work. And so if you can't get jazzed by it, then you shouldn't do it. And I don't work up every single day saying I really can't wait to get to work, but I'd say 95% of the time I do. It's pretty cool stuff. I like it. And the 5% that I don't, I have to really force myself to get to work. Now imagine if that were switched around. And 95% of the time I just couldn't imagine going into this place. There are lots of jobs out there. So if you find yourself in a role that you just don't like, quit and find a new place. And I guarantee you, if you find a place that you love, you'll be successful in the broad words of success. And my sixth and last is aimed at anyone who is not, anyone who is different. So women, minorities, I mean, just about everybody is different today, but the power structure is still fairly tight around a certain demographic. If you're different and you think that you have to actually trade off who you are to make it, then you're going to fail. This is a big, when I was a youngster in college, and then when I went for my first job, it was different times. So my hair was significantly larger than this. And believe it or not, even though I speak like I'm from New York now, you should have heard me back then. Faster, significantly more dialect-based conversations, addressed totally differently. And the thing that was great was that I was allowed to morph myself into a place that I felt comfortable, not to line up and look and act like the majority. And women in particular have a really big struggle in this area. There was a time in the 80s and early 90s when women would wear suits, skirts and jackets with the little bow ties, remember, with the shirts and cufflinks, the whole bit. And I remember I did this for a little while. Very uncomfortable. I didn't particularly like it. Now I look back on it, and what we were trying to do at that time was to actually look like a male leader in the woman's equivalent. And what now, if you look at most of the women leaders in business, there's a mix that you wouldn't believe. They wear all kinds of things, anything that makes them obviously presentable, reasonably respectable, et cetera, but makes them feel comfortable. That difference, I'm just using clothing here as a simple description, but they're more personal things as well. Those differences are the reason why they got you in the company. They didn't get you in the company because they really wanted a man and they could only get you. Or they really wanted a white guy and they could only get you. They got you because you had something unique about you, and you were not just a mind. You were not just, like I said, a physical body. You had something unique. And if we trade that off, I think that we lose so much in the value that we can give to the organization, but also in the people who look to you to aspire to be like you. And that's a big thing. So this thing about being authentic will transform me into a little bit about leadership. And I'll go through these real quick, and then we'll open up for questions. So first, you have to be authentic. You have to kind of figure out your space and be comfortable in your space. You have to be good, obviously, all that stuff that I talked about earlier, but then you have to be authentic. Second thing you have to do is listen. It's the total opposite of what you think. You shouldn't talk, and this has been said over and over again. It's just the hardest thing in the world to do. It's the hardest thing to do, which is to listen enough to actually really hear what people are saying. Not what they're saying physically, but what they're really saying, what they mean, what they want. This is to your customers, to your shareholders, to your organization, to your family, et cetera, et cetera. And I am a very, very good arguer. My son can testify to this for sure. I can argue anyone into a corner. And for about a year of your life, you think this is probably the best value that you have, and you realize it's probably the worst attribute you can have. Because with that, you actually shut down a whole bunch of other discussion and debate. And unless, one of my mentors told me, Vernon Jordan, told me, he said, you're really smart, really bright. You have a really good gift of gab. He said, unless you could do every single job, it's going to be the end of you. Unless you could do every single job yourself, it's going to be the end of you. And it took me, this is another one of these things where you said, oh my goodness, well, what does that mean? And years later, you realize what it is. In order to get things done, you have to do the third thing. That's to figure out a way to get followership. And followership doesn't mean that people are following you, behind you. It means that in many cases, they are leading you to a place. It just means that you abdicate the center, right? That the center is someone else for whatever times or roles or specialities there are. And if you can't figure out a way to create followership and move away from the center, then you better be the most agile, durable, fastest person in the world, because you just can't do all the work yourself. A little subset under there. I had to learn also, one of the things that the way it's done is not always the way that you would get it done, and just as long as it gets done efficiently. And the fact that it's not the way that I get it done is kind of minimal. It's a minimal part of the problem. Fourth, you have to take a stand. Leaders have to take a stand. They have to literally stand out by declaring something. This is an interesting set of challenges, I think, that I see in leadership today in just about anything. It's really amazing that one of the ways that I distinguished myself in my company was to actually say what I thought. I would have not thought that that would have been a big differentiator. But people saying what you think sets a stake for people to actually argue with you and to tear it down or even build it up. But most of the energy in the beginning is tearing it down. And so what I see happen often is that people actually don't declare themselves. They step back waiting for someone else to declare themselves so that they can be part of the active debate around that other person's position. It's really a good idea if you have a strong opinion. You have to be smart and obviously know what the hell you're talking about. If you have a strong opinion, to actually say it. Many times, this is what they say as well, many times it's what somebody else in the room is wanting to say or thinking about, but they just don't feel strong enough to say it. If you're good at what you do and you know what you're doing and you say what you think, half the time at least you won't get anywhere with it, but people will at least know that you have an opinion and that you've actually thought through things and that you are strong enough to state it. Sounds obvious. It is really lacking in business. It really is lacking in business. When you're young, people have it. People have it when they're young, and then when they get to a point where they can be knocked down off of something that's a little bit of a higher perch, they start to withdraw more and more and more. In my leadership team, one of the most valued things is a debate. It's a debate in the room about some topic that's important that we have to actually make a decision on. And hopefully it's a debate with differing opinions or different points of view. And it's an important thing. There are a couple of things that we did. When we were nearly bankrupt in 2000, Ann Mulcahy was the CEO then. I was running corporate infrastructure, manufacturing, a whole bunch of other stuff, which was spending a whole bunch of money, most of the spending of the companies in this organization. And we had bankers in to help us. Bankers. They were experts, and they were telling us what we should do. And the one consistent message that we got was that we spend between ourselves and our partners $1.6 billion in research and development. And anybody who knows about research and development knows that you put $1.6 billion in, and then maybe 3 or 4 years later, you get some money out. So if you actually stopped it today, you wouldn't feel a thing, today or tomorrow even. So one of the big pieces of advice that we got was to shut this down, literally shut it down. And then we could start it later. Shut it down and you could start it later. The decision that Ann Mulcahy made was to pour more money into R&D. Not touch a thing that we were doing. We made it a little bit more efficient, et cetera, but to put more money into R&D, because the thing that she didn't want to do is have us survive but not thrive. Have us survive but just kind of barely lip along. Big decision against all of the better advice that we had. Second decision that we made that was really amazing was height of the recession last year. There's many in between. Height of recession in 2000 last year. There's no bank that would give anybody any money. And we saw this company called ACS cost $9 billion, $6 billion in cash, and then $3 billion of assuming their debt and a whole bunch of other things you had to do. And we were, at that time, a $16.5 billion company, revenue. And about the same market cap, actually, which was not that great. And we said, we'll go buy them. was myself and the CFO. Now, I had been CEO for like a month. So obviously, when I said this, the entire stock market said that's the worst decision in the world, and our stock went from 10 to 5 or 4, some bad number. It was really not a good number. And the reason why we did it was because there was an opportunity that you could not get at another time. This was the best time to do it. No one was buying anything. And all we had to do was figure out a way to get the money. And we lined up with JP Morgan and got the money. And now, if you read anything, by the way, still the story's not done yet. I still have a lot to do. We still have a lot to do to make this truly successful. Now people say it's the most amazing and smartest deal ever made. Really? It's amazing how you go from, but it was all about doing something that you really believed in that was counter to what was normal at the time. So fourth is that you have to actually have a vision, you have to have an opinion, you have to make it, and you have to therefore take some risks at times. Fifth is objectives. Leaders have to have objectives. They have to have measures. You know, things about, I'll give you another one and then I'll stop. Advertising campaign. I'm an engineer. So when I hear advertising, I say, interesting. Show me the measures for the advertising campaign. And they say, well, you can't really measure it. You know, you get these hits on the website. And I said, well, with the advertising campaign, is anybody buying more stuff? Well, we can't really exactly tell because there's not really a direct path from. So I'm still a little bit reticent about advertising. We spend a lot of money on advertising, by the way, and I'm getting converted. But this idea of making an investment, setting clear objectives, and then actually measuring them, and if you don't get them, you have to pull the investment or pull the person or do whatever, change it, is another thing that we kind of lose a little bit. Another side story. My daughter is 5'2". Her brother played volleyball. She decided that she was going to play volleyball too. So she goes to a really great school. She tries out for the volleyball team, and she makes it. It's pretty good. So I go to the first volleyball game, and I realize that these kids are not playing volleyball. This is a girl. They were posing. They were doing all kinds of other things. Their hair was nice. They had none of those things on their knees because they didn't really want to get their knees. So I said to the coach, I said, so is the objective here to win? And she said, no, it's that to have everybody play. I said, okay, just as long as we understand that that's the objective, I'm okay. But you cannot put a team together and have substandard performance and then say when the kids come off the field, great job. Because that's teaching, to me, the wrong set of standards. We can say, we're here for team building and getting you to work well together, and we're not going to really focus that much on winning the game. But if you stand on the field and you say we want to win, and you put the worst people on the field and are not willing to correct, then be prepared for failure, for losing. We are stepping away from these very clear, hard metrics. You got to actually do a job, and you have to do it well. And if you're not doing it well, someone has to call you on it and say, improve. And I'll help you improve. If you want to, we'll train you better. We'll do something, whatever it is. But we're in this like let's everybody feel better and everybody love each other kind of a mode, to the detriment, I think, to actually people focusing, trying hard, and differentiating great performance from not so good performance. That's something that we have to get back to. Sixth and most important, I'm going to end the way I started on, have fun. One of the most amazing things about leaders is that you can tell when they are not pleased. And you can also tell when they're not happy. And I don't mean happy with what you did, but happy with the work that they're doing, with the energy that they feel, with how far they will go. And it's so easy to read. It's so easy to read. You think you have it all covered up, and you don't. And if you're not really passionate about it and they're not having fun, then all these other 5 things that I said, what difference does it make? So you got to pull the first part together about being a team player, and then the second part about being a leader. And if you do that, then you'll be really, really good, I guess. Be great. One last diversion, then questions. So now you can start thinking about the questions. I never mentioned money. So success is, I talk a lot about success. I never said that to be successful, you should have 100,000 people working for you and make $10 million. If I know that it's hard to speak to a group of people who are in school trying to figure out a way to get out of school and get a job and have probably debt mounting up in this process, but I beg you to actually take into account the fact that the measure of money is the least important measure over the long term. It really is. If I could, there is a point where there is too much, and you'll know when you get to the point where there is too much. Unfortunately, you have to get to too much to know it, and by that time you may have lost so much of the fun and the joy and the wonder and just kind of hanging out and enjoying the situation that you're in right now, and trying to have people around you be better as well as just you being better. In the pursuit of this, I just have to make more money. That guy makes $1 million and I only make 600,000. And you say, well, do you need the other 400,000 really? Is it going to really change your life? It's an important lesson that it takes a long time to learn. I had a little bit of a benefit in that I came from so far down from a money standpoint that when I got to $29,000, I thought I was set in the world. Obviously, today, $29,000, you're not set in the world. Inflation adjusts that, $100,000 or whatever, $200,000 you're set in the world. There is a point where you have to kind of step back and say, I'm not willing to disrupt my happiness. I'm not willing to move all over the place. I'm not willing to miss this major parts of my kid's life. Those are the kinds of things that you are being, the choices you're being faced with. There is a point where you have to say, I have had enough. I had enough, and it'll come around, and it's good enough. In the roles that you are today, the drive almost always is towards getting out and landing the best job so you can make the most money. And I just say step back a little bit and make sure that you take into account your own happiness, what goals you really want from the wholesome point, and then how your decisions will impact the rest of the world. And if you can put those together, and you end up with lots of money, then it's great. But if you end up with lots of money and not the rest of that stuff, then you find that it's really hollow victory. So, with that, in a nutshell, the tramps through leadership and just career management, I'm just ready for questions. So any questions are good. The only thing you can't ask me about is the stock price and what President Obama will do. Yell, and I'll repeat it if after. There's a mic coming.
First of all, thanks so much for being here. It's really been inspiring for me. You touched on it a little bit, but what was your mom's definition of success, and what's yours?
Yeah, her definition was really simple. Like my mother, like I said, was pretty much black and white. And her thing was, you have to leave the world with more than you entered it. So that's nothing scientist, rocket science. She said to me all the time, you have to leave the world with more than you entered it. And she meant that in the wholesome. Now, if she were a modern person, she would be like Jack Welch. She would be speaking in front of you guys, right? And she would have made it into some other platitude, good is the enemy of great, or something like that, these great statements. Her point was that that we're all connected. She thought of it from her family first, right? So my brother, my sister, and I, and then my cousins, and we're all connected. And we can't be successful or happy if we see people who are not successful and happy. Now, this is a high standard. This is a crazy standard. I mean, based on today, with all of this new media, you see people who are not happy every single day. So she obviously didn't want you to get wrapped up into being sad because you see on TV. But her thing was, you have a universe that you care about, and that universe expands every single day. And it's important that you look at success not only from, I'm doing well, I'm doing really well, but my sister's not doing well, or my brother's not doing well, or my cousins are not doing well, your neighborhood's not doing well. Her thing was, you got to stretch out and go further. My definition of success very much aligns with that. I'm having a harder time meeting it than she did, right? For her, it was our family. We have more insight now than she had then. More insight is not probably a good word, but more visibility into what's happening in the world. So you get, I sit back and say, well, they have to be able to figure out a way to help the people who are not getting a great education, help whatever, help the people in Iraq because they're being subjugated or whatever the issues are. You can't get that far either because you'll be crazy. So somewhere between there, what I've done is said, okay, I have a group of people, a pretty big group of people that I absolutely care about and that have to be, that can't suffer. And then I have these innocuous groups that I don't know who they are, that I have to be able to help. And there's two groups. One is education changed my life, right? Just having the access to go to a good school, high school, a better high school than the average, and then to go to a good college, and then to go to a good graduate school. These things actually differentiated me from 99% of the people in my neighborhood. So why, if that wasn't hard, it was, it was hard for my mother, I said, but it wasn't really that hard for me. So my thing is we should be able to have that set of choices, something like that, to as many people as possible. So I spend a tremendous amount of time trying to close this gap between a great educational system and people who need it and want it, the gap is huge in the United States today. I'm trying to do that. Second one is on jobs. This is really tough. Because in my career, in our company, we've laid off hundreds of thousands of people. We've hired hundreds of thousands of people as well. And so this whole idea about how do we create an institution that doesn't have to go through these cycles all the time is a place that I put a lot of focus, because I know that cycle is unbelievably disruptive to a person. When you look at it in hundreds of thousands, you go, just a mass of people. But there is a person who you run into the street and they say, I lost my job last week, and you realize that's just a disastrous situation for them. So these are the two places where I spend a lot of energy. I've gotten old enough to realize I can't change everything. I can't fix everything, but if I have free moments, it's on those two places.
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Thomas. Thank you very much for coming.
Welcome.
I thought maybe with the commencement program we could get a picture of you with the big hair. Probably look. I'd love to see it.
Susan knows the penalties for those kinds of behaviors.
The question I wanted to ask, you spent 30 years at Xerox. You said the benefit was you learned the business from the ground up, and you were rewarded along the way with challenge and opportunity. Now, of course, people seem to be moving around a lot more from different companies. Do you think to be CEO of a company like Xerox, you need to spend 30 years? Do you think your replacement will have to have been a 30-year vet of Xerox? Or can you move around from different companies and different experiences and do a job like yours?
I think it's significantly more likely today that you can move around. And it depends a lot on the company. And we've had 7 CEOs at Xerox, and then I'll broaden it, 7 CEOs. 6 of them were reasonably successful, and 1 was fired. Now, the commonality of the guys who actually stayed around was that we were born and raised there, or spent at least 15 years there. And the guy who was fired was someone who spent 9 months at Xerox before he decided to change everything. The benefit of being in one place is not that you know the technology or the system, the CRM systems or where the locations are, is that all companies are a compilation of a whole bunch of people. And by the way, location to location, a lot of differences in location to location. And the benefit of being a lifer or a long-timer, not necessarily a long-timer, is that you get to know not the technical side of the business, but the software side of the business. And that's an important thing. I don't believe it's required. I don't believe walk-in takeovers work. I mean, you can just look at them. Walk-in takeover CEOs, they generally don't work. So I think that somewhere in between today, when I started out, mobility was just the idea of going from the East Coast to the West Coast, that cost thousands of dollars and took a lot of time. Now you don't even have to go, you can do telepresence. So I think that there's an ability to do it without staying in one place. And if you don't like the one place, then you almost have to leave, right? So it's a mix today. Tech companies are easier. I take that back. I'm not really sure that that's true. So, okay. And then we'll get you.
Thank you for being with us and sharing your inspiring stories and experience. You mentioned as a leader, you need to get followership and move away from the center. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a lot of the points that I made about being in a safe zone always. Being in a safe zone always doesn't really give people, back to this thing about being authentic, that people say, so, how did you do it? You know, or how did you do it? And I say, well, I don't know how I did it. I just kind of came to work every day and engaged it like it was real, like it was not, you know, I was just not here visiting and working. And if you can give people a sense of who you are, let me divert. One of the things that I learned early, that I was taught early, I didn't learn it well, was, this is a statement that's made over and over again, you should never let them see you sweat. You ever heard this story, this statement? So I literally, when I was, you know, president, everyone told me that you can never let them see you sweat, Ursula. And I said, they have to see you sweat. If they don't see you sweat, how the hell do they know what you care about? Right? If you actually address everything that way. So one of the things about followership is showing people that it's okay to be who they are. If you're okay, it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to be nervous and upset. It's definitely okay to fail. It is okay to fail and be really pissed off about it. This is another thing. When I make a bad decision, I'm really angry about it, and people actually see that. It's okay to be who you are. If you can do that, and everybody, I mean, you can't be crazy, right? You can't, you know, you can't be crazy. But if you're generally well-behaved, raised by good parents, that kind of stuff, and people see who you are, then people feel comfortable being who they are, and then being the leader becomes less of an issue. Because in order to lead, you have to kind of distinguish yourself from the rest of the group, right? You have to stand in front of them, and they have to all look at your back when you're walking. And one of the things, it's really important to actually feel comfortable with people a lot around you who allow you to shut up, and you know, and my biggest advice is just chill out a little bit, not be so serious, not be so perfect, not be so right, not be so infallible, not be so, you know, all these insightful, all these things that people say about great leadership. You are just a person who wakes up in the morning. You may have had a bad morning. When you come to work, you can bring some of that with you. You don't have to leave it all at the door. You can't bring it all with you. I mean, then you're moody brat, right? But some of it with you. And people see that, and they feel comfortable doing that as well. And I think that that's when you get followership. That's my perspective. Yeah, there was someone in the middle that, yeah. And then I'll get you.
Sorry.
Yeah, you, sorry. Yell and I'll repeat it if you can't get a mic.
Sure. Thank you for coming to see us. I was wondering if you could share with us a couple of perhaps pivotal moments in your career. I'm sure there's been times when you had to make hard decisions or, you know, weren't sure what to do next.
Yeah. So the question was about pivotal moments in my career. And I've had many. One of the things I didn't speak about was this idea of mentors and sponsors and people helping you. And one of the most important moments in my career was, there's three people important moments. One was when I met my husband. He wasn't my husband then, obviously, and we weren't even dating at that time. It was a proper corporate romance. And I was an engineer, a mechanical engineer, master's degree in mechanical engineering. I was hired to do some experiments on high-speed rotating discs, the aerodynamics of high speed. We were going to use them as a polygon to actually scan an image across a page. This was a long time. Now they do it. Now you guys do it in your sleep. And I was hired, and I was put in a lab. And I would get into work every day, and I had a lab technician who worked for me. And I walked down this long hallway past all these offices, and literally went into my lab. And then at 5 o'clock, I got out of my lab and went back home, because that's what you did at work. And my husband, who was 20 years older than I am, and he's a physicist at work. He was a scientist and many patents, really guy. One day he stopped me in the hallway after about a year and a half or 2 years of this, and he said, you know, every day you walk down this hallway and you don't really engage with anyone in the company. And he said to me, do you know who runs the company? Do you know who the CEO is? Me. CEO? What the hell is a CEO? I didn't know. I mean, but back then, you know, who the hell knew what a CEO was? Now you know them, you can look them up all over the place. So that was the first engagement that said, this is not just a place that you walk and get, you know, paid your money. There is stuff happening in here, and you should feel compelled to engage it. That was one. The second people thing was we have on our board still to this day a gentleman, I mentioned him earlier, named Vernon Jordan. And Vernon Jordan, when I was very young in the company, wrote me a note. Did I know that he knew who I was? And he wrote me a note, and he said, he saw me in the board. I made a presentation to the board, and he said, you were really good. The presentation was really good. And then he gave me 3 pieces of advice. I mean, the advice was like slamming advice. You know, what were you wearing? I mean, just a whole things like this. And this came from this guy who was like God at this point, right? And he said, call me. And then after about a week, he wrote me another note. These are letters that had to go through the mail, right? And they said, you haven't called me. And the second experience is that when people reach out to you, this is when they give you advice, you should probably they're doing it because they care about you. That's the second. And the third was, and never let them see you sweat. That was a negative piece of advice. She told me don't ever let them see you sweat, and I decided that they should. So people helped a lot. That's one of the positive experiences is to realize that there are people who I don't even know. You know, Vernon Jordan I didn't know. Paul Allaire, who hired me as his assistant, I mean, I met him 2 times. These kinds of things, and people are watching out for you, and that's a very positive thing generally in business. There's not an infrastructure that wants to destroy you, because why would they have hired you in the first place? They want you to succeed. The second piece of advice, the second pivotal moment was when I got offered a job outside of the United States on 2 months' notice, and I took it. And it was the best personal, family, business experience ever. The farther you get away from the center of a company, the better you are. I'm serious. The headquarters are in Connecticut, go to Japan. because when you're close to the headquarters, they're very interested in what you're doing, and they can check on you all the time. And when you're far away, you have a lot of control because they just aren't there. They're just not there. They're not, they're tethered. They're not visiting you all the time, et cetera, et cetera. So moving far away was there. And the third pivotal experience was a failure. And all of my failures, I have many, many failures every single day. Most of them are associated with people making the wrong hiring decision or not firing fast enough. All of them. It's amazing. One of the worst decisions I made was actually hiring a person to run a big piece of our business. I hired him. So, he wasn't even in the company, so I go hunt the guy, bring him in, and you're fully invested in this, right? So the guy comes in, and he's a disaster. And how long did you let it go? A long time. Because if I changed it fast, it would have been a million failure fast. So I waited a long time, and it became a bigger and bigger and bigger disaster for him and for me, by the way. So you had to kind of step up and do it. So there's lots that you can learn from just about any experience. A lot of things happen to you, right? And you have to realize that it's not luck. You know what I mean? That's not, luckily I met X or Y or Z, and luckily they wrote me the number. It's not luck. There's something that comes out of it. And failure is an important thing. And somebody asked me once, how do you deal with it? I said, the same way everybody else does. Denial first. Absolutely not a problem. It was their problem, not my problem. First is that. Second is that anger. That if only they didn't do that to me. The third is total embarrassment. So if I just stay away long enough, people will forget. The normal things, by the way, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company does it as well. Denial, anger, all that stuff. You just have to do the cycle you're required to do it faster than everybody else, right? But it doesn't require that you're not a regular human being. I hope I answered your question. Thanks.
Hi.
One more.
Thanks so much for being here, and thanks for sharing the stories about your mother and the various insights that she shared with you. One of the things my father's always said to my brother, sister, and I is that one of the best leadership traits you can have is knowing when opportunity is knocking. And clearly throughout your career at Xerox, you were able to see opportunity knocking and recognizing whether it was early on for the assistant positions or later on as you've continued to go. In 2000, I know that you were thinking about leaving the company. Can you please talk a little bit about your decision to stay and as well as opportunity knocking there?
Yeah, it's good. I was recruited a lot throughout my career. Generally because when they recruit, they don't know who you are, right? They read the stories. One story becomes everybody else's story. So if you read one story about me, it's everybody else's story. And if it's wrong, unfortunately, it's the story that lives. But and up until 2000, I had not actively engaged with recruiters or with companies that would call, even if they had more money, because I was having a lot of fun. I was pretty much settled in the community I was in. We were doing just fine. And the amount of money, $100,000 more, was not worth, or whatever the amount was, the disruption that it would cause, and I was doing really well. In 2000, in 1999, something happened in our company that was pretty amazing. I would come to work most days up until that point, just most days, and think that if I did my job well and led my team well, that we could make a difference. It was, you know, it would be okay. So I was running manufacturing. So manufacturing is the best job in the world because of all jobs, it's the best job. You walk in, they make 50 of these things, they plug it in and it works, it's good. And if it doesn't work, then it's bad. It's really immediate feedback on the cycle. It's really good, and the people are just regular old guys, right? Not too highfalutin. I love the job. And we had a new leader come in, a new CEO, and I was 2 levels below him. And this guy was crazy. He really was not, he was totally different. And I don't mean different personality, because we had, you know, country CEOs, city CEOs, foreign, it wasn't that. It was he had a completely different idea about what was important, what defined success, everything, success. And I actually decided, I remember having a conversation with him, because he said, you know, you have to come and visit me, and I did. And he said, well, that stuff you're doing? I said, well, this is what we're doing. And he says, well, that stuff we're doing is not that important. This is, by the way, which is okay if it's not that important, just as long as you give me something else to do that's a little bit more important, or I can find a way. So we're taking a different direction in the company. We're going to have to do this, this, and this. And this stuff that you do is really not that important. So until I give you a call back and tell you what's important, just keep doing this unimportant thing. He didn't quite say it that way, but that was basically what was going on. That was the start of the conversation to many other conversations where I realized the guy just didn't get it. And that's when I said, if I can work every day really, really hard and lead a team really hard and do things to the best of our ability and it will make no difference to the success of the company, I should go. That was when I decided to take an offer. I literally was, you know, I was called, and then in a real fast cycle, I accepted an offer at DEL. And I told a very good friend of mine, Vernon Jordan, that I was leaving. And he said, whoa, you can't leave. I said, well, you can't leave. It's in Texas, which not the greatest in the world. I'm sorry if there's anybody from Texas. I'm sorry. I'm a Northeasterner, and Texas is very southern, and it's a big state. Texas wasn't that cool. The company was cool. I thought it was cool at the time. DEL was pretty cool at the time. Amazing cash conversion cycle, amazing supply chain, and I was actually in manufacturing, was getting really into that kind of stuff. And went down and visit, got an offer, did the whole thing. And we were looking for houses and everything. And Vernon, I told Vernon I'm going. He said, well, and Rick Thoman was running the company at the time. By the way, Rick Thoman is a smart man, and I'm sure a nice man. He just wasn't good for our company. And I said to Vernon, I'm leaving. He said, well, how's your husband? Good. He said, so your husband's older than you? Yeah, he's 20 years older than I am. He said, so he gets a little frail. I'm like, where's this going? Gets a little frail. Not as active as he was before, a little sickly. Would you leave? And a really handsome guy comes courting. A little bit more your age, a little bit cooler, definitely. Would you leave him? I said, no. I said, but you got to give me more story about the guy. But the answer is no. He says, well, that's what's happening here. It was really amazing. He said, you can't leave now because this husband of yours, this partner of yours is losing their direction. You need to stay and help them. And it was the best advice. So I had to reverse everything. And it was part of this. You have a responsibility. They've shown you the world. They've given you so on, so on, so on, so on. You've done your part. But how can you leave the first time that something goes wrong in magnitude? So you must stay. And I did. And the rest, as they say, is history. Thank you.
Beautifully done.